Hey everybody, this is Paul from This Way to the Garden. In this video I'm going to talk about what happens when you get the bad type of mold in your bokashi bin. So recently in one of my bokashi bins, I mistakenly put in an orange in there that had some green mold on it. I figured, hey, if I put it in there, maybe if I had enough stuff in there, put enough of the Bokashi brand, it should take care of it. Basically the good stuff will outweigh the bad stuff and that mold will be kept in check. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. The green mold ended up taking over the entire bokashi bin. Luckily, there was only 2 or 3 layers in there, so I didn't lose much. But since that was the bad type of mold, you don't want that mold in your bokashi bin, I ended up throwing that bokashi batch out and just sanitizing the entire bucket out so there's no longer any mold spores in that bucket. I did not throw that bad bokashi batch in the trash. Instead, what I did is throw it in my regular compost bin, because the regular compost bin being an open system, there's air flowing through, there's other life in there going back and forth. Any of the bad mold that's present in that batch can get properly taken care of in the traditional compost bin. Versus these bokashi systems, which are a closed system, once you put the stuff in, you're closing it up, you're keeping it airtight. So something like that green mold in this case ended up taking over everything. The white mold, the good stuff that you want, wasn't able to get a hold. So basically just ruined that batch. And you could tell by the smell of it. The smell was off, the color was off. I do have some footage here I'm going to share in a little bit of when I put that bokashi bucket outside and basically dumped the contents of it. What I did end up doing after I dumped it is just fill the bucket up with some water, basically chlorinated water that came straight out of the tap. Left it there for a couple hours just to help sanitize that bucket, dump it out, and I did restart that bucket with new batches of bokashi. It's been running great. I haven't been having any bad molds in there. You just have the usual white mold that you would expect in such a batch of bokashi. So any of the bad molds, your green molds, black molds, anything basically that isn't a white mold. The good mold you usually have in there is a white mold. It kind of looks like fluffy cotton candy or a cotton ball type of thing. And that mold is good. Having that in there is part of the process of breaking down your organic material, and it's not going to hurt anything in your bokashi bin. Whereas on the other hand, you get that green mold, black mold, anything other than white, that's where you're going to run into problems. And that's where the best bet is just to dispose of that, get rid of that batch, sanitize your bokashi bin, make sure it's clean, you don't have any leftover spores in there, and just start over new. So the easiest way to tell that your batch is off is just by the looks and the smells. The smell is usually pretty telltale. Your typical bokashi smells kind of a sweet, fermenting type of smell. Doesn't smell bad, doesn't smell off. Whereas you start getting those bad molds, like in my case, I got the green mold. It looked green, grayish. It just smelled different. It wasn't something like normal that I'm typically familiar with. If you've been doing enough batches of bokashi, you get used to the traditional smell. It's not necessarily a bad smell, but you understand what that smell is, and then anytime it's a different smell, then you know, okay, something's going on there. Let's take a look, see what it is. Do you see any different types of mold growing in there? And just get rid of that batch and start over again. It's usually a small batch. If you've got a traditional compost bin like I do, then put it in there. If you don't, another option too is just, if you've got a place where you can dig up a hole in the ground, dig it up, throw it in there, just bury it over. No harm, no foul. The microbes in the soil eventually are going to process everything. It goes back to the earth, and you're still getting benefit out of that organic material. So with that, let's go step outside and take a look at how I dealt with this bad bokashi batch. So here's a household tip. As you can see, you've got snow on the steps over here, got some snow in the yard. It snowed recently. Basically, we got below freezing temperatures. So as you can see, I've got my hose disconnected here. So you never want to leave your hose connected to the spigot in the wintertime, especially when you get below freezing temperatures. It should always be removed, because what happens sometimes is the water stays in here, especially when in the hose, it stays in there, and then there's a chance that it'll freeze. And so when it freezes, it can damage the mechanism in here, or it can even just split your garden hose. It can even split the copper over here, because water, when it freezes, it expands, can cause quite a bit of damage. And actually, when we purchased this house, we had an inspection. Didn't even really need a home inspection for that, but you could see right away that the prior homeowner had done that. They had left the hose connected, and so this was continually dripping. This was summertime when we purchased the house, so it was one of the repairs we made. Not necessarily a cheap repair, but something you want to be aware of. So that's just a side tip. So as you can see here, this Bokashi batch got overwhelmed by green mold. It basically kind of renders this entire batch useless. So the plan is just to dump this batch directly into my compost bin over there. Being outdoors, it'll take care of itself. And then I will soak this in some water. Just leave it in some water for a couple hours. Help get rid of the mold hanging around in the bucket. And then restart again. So you can definitely see the batch that I just tossed out here is contaminated with green mold. Doesn't smell quite like the other Bokashi batch. It has a little bit more putrid smell compared to the regular Bokashi. It's got a little more slightly sweet, pickled, fermented smell. So this will process in here just fine. Like I mentioned before, because of the being an open system, the traditional compost can deal with things like mold much better than the Bokashi can. So Bokashi, typically you just want to see the white mold, not this green mold here. So I did rinse out the Bokashi cap as well as the bucket there, just to make sure I get rid of any residual mold in there, because it's possible that mold could contaminate a future batch. So luckily it's above freezing today, so I can fill this bucket up here, leave it with water, soak it for a little bit, and it's chlorinated water, so that'll help sanitize it. If it were below freezing, I wouldn't leave it outside like this. So there's always the chance that if it freezes, it'll split the bucket, damage the bucket. Don't want that to happen, but luckily it's warm enough today, so you can sit out here for an hour or two and sanitize in the process. If you found this video to be helpful so far, please hit that like button so others can find it too. If you have any questions as well, please drop those in the comments below. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.